Hi everyone, I'm Mike Sexton, who just witnessed the biggest win in poker history. And now we're going to break it down, show you what was really going on, and point out what to look for when you see it again. Welcome to the premiere edition of the WPT Poker Corner.
The best moves.
I'm all in. I call.
Made the right move once again.
I'm Daniel Negreanu, and I'm going to tell you the one big reason why this guy won the tournament.
Man, we got the king of poker.
The biggest blunders.
Well, that is a tough break for Matt right there.
I'm Annie Duke, and I'm going to tell you how it could have easily been somebody else.
He is a fearless warrior that's not backing up from anybody.
The top tips.
His opponent was on a draw. That card did not help him at all.
And an insider's peek through the poker keyhole.
There's a possible straight draw, possible flush draw out there.
I'm Phil Hellmuth, and I'm going to tell you why it should have been me.
I'm all in.
Plus, the key to spotting tells. Do you think you know what you're seeing? The poker pros will reveal the ultimate poker secrets. The WPT Championship is in the spotlight as this week's guest pros join host Mike Sexton for an unpredictable and informative hour of poker. This is the WPT Poker Corner, where it's all about the poker.
This is the WPT Poker Corner, and joining me are poker pros Annie Duke, Phil Hellmuth, and Daniel Negreanu. Well, all right, we just saw two more guys become instant millionaires on the World Poker Tour. While it's still fresh in your minds, give us your gut reactions to this WPT Championship. Daniel?
Well, I think there's just so much to pick apart in this show. We had some really, really fantastic play and some, well, not so fantastic play.
Annie?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I agree with Daniel's assessment there, but I also think that this tournament really shows you the power of chips, the power of the big stack, and you have a guy in Martin Dick Naif who's just so adept and so well-timed on playing that big stack, and you see what happens when you hand a player like that a lot of chips, how they can just run that final table and never look back.
Well, he played him great. Phil?
You know, we were talking about pressure, $2.7 million for first prize, and some people fall apart under pressure and some people rise up and are champions under pressure. You see it in every other sport. And to me, it's a tale of two cities. You have 4 or 5 really bad kind of amateurish plays, kind of donkified. And then you have the other hand where you have Martin, who's just has perfect timing.
500.
Martin still has top pair. He's going to bet it.
I'm all in.
Look at this. He's going all in.
I call.
He has done it.
And Martin quickly calls it.
Wow. If Matt can get lucky and catch an ace, he stays alive. But no, he doesn't catch it. Picked the wrong time to try to bluff the chip leader. Well, no doubt about it, his timing was perfect all day. Now, you've all been there before. High-pressure situations, big prize pools. You know, what was the critical moment of this tournament to you? Annie?
Well, you know, for me, it actually happened very early in the tournament on hand number 2 when you see Steve Brecker hand Martin $1.4 million that Martin really should have never gotten a hold of.
Gutsy move by the amateur actor Steve Brecker.
Wow.
Martin should have won $160,000 from Steve on that hand. Instead, he busts Steve. Now Martin has a prohibitive chip lead. And importantly, by knocking Steve out, he's now directly on Hassan Habib's left. And Martin being right on Hassan Habib's left with that huge stack really gave Hassan a lot of trouble and really handcuffed him.
Well, that certainly got him off to a great start.
Yeah, and to further Annie's point, he raises in the first position with ace-4. And in the second position, you have a re-raise with ace-queen. When someone raises in the second position, they're always going to have a hand. They have to worry about the 4 people behind them. And then to move all in there with ace-4, a little weak.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think speaking to the $2.7 million, you know, that might have been Steve cracking a little under the pressure. You know? Yes.
Daniel?
Well, I think clearly the hand that defined the tournament was the king deuce of clubs. Martin been playing great, and on this hand he got a little bit lucky, but he did play the hand well. He flopped a flush draw.
Could be some fireworks here. Martin checks the nut flush draw.
Got 4 to the flush, but we know Richard, of course, has aces up.
400,000.
He's going to bet 400,000, he said.
Make Martin pay for this.
Richard bets 400,000.
I'm all in.
Martin goes all in with his flush draw here, and Richard quickly calls. A nice call by Richard here.
Now, I was quite surprised that Richard made this call with ace-7 so quickly. I feel like if I had the ace-7, I might have checked the flop on the turn, get the majority of the money in, and I'm not so sure that Martin folds on the turn.
My personal opinion is that Richard, given the way that he played the hand the way that he did by betting on the flop, has the big check raise. I think you got to give him props for making that call.
Wait. Props for the call, yes, because he was right. But please, the guy had ace-7, the flop came ace-3-3, and he got check raised $2 million, and he called in 2 seconds. Poker is about reason and intellect and reads. And maybe he just had a great read, or maybe it was he just acted a little too quickly. So he gets props for the call, but in my book, he'd get a lot more props for the call if he actually studied for 30 or 40 seconds.
Well, I'm not sure
he
that
went with his instincts, I think. You got to give him credit for that call, don't you?
I'm not sure that what his thought process was there. He may have thought that call ahead before it came to that decision.
Let's hold it right there. Daniel, I agree with you. That was the critical hand of this tournament. He got lucky to catch that club at the river. That play may have cost Richard $2 million in real money.
That's right.
So we've got so much more to bring you. Don't go away. We'll be right back with the corner right after this.
Daniel, I think you and I are on the same page.
Coming up later, it's time for show and tell.
Since Matt didn't have a king or a queen.
The tells that show the difference between the winners and the also-rans. Revealed for the first time anywhere by our team of poker experts. And next, how can you play solid poker for 5 straight days?
That's what I put you on.
And lose everything in a matter of moments.
He only plays a few tournaments a year.
Lightning strikes when the WPT Poker Corner continues.
Well, I am the short stack as we begin tonight. Fortunately, the way the structure of the WPT final table is, it doesn't mean that I'm desperate, because we do have time to play. Even as the shortest stack, my stack is large enough to make a raise without going all in.
Boy, talk about words to come back to haunt you. It's a little spooky. Steve says he's got time to play, but let's watch and see what he does. Here's Steve looking down at a pair of 3s. Now, Phil, he limps in here in this spot. Now, what do you think of that play?
Well, I think that the limp is okay, but even better would be a raise, especially given this is the first hand. He's going to end up risking $260,000, $60,000 call and a $200,000 bet on the flop. Why not just open for $210,000, 3.5 times the big blinds? There's a high probability he's going to win. No one wants to play hand 1. Take the money.
Daniel, what do you think of the limp?
Well, I'll tell you, I like it if it's going to set something up for later. A limp on the very first hand of the tournament, people have got to be wondering, that smells funny. That smells like aces. And I think, as you see, he gets Russell Rosenblum to believe him. He gets Russell off a pair of jacks. So he was really unlucky there that Matt, happened to have a king.
You're like $1 million behind, Steve.
Well, this is 8, and that's 3.
Don't you think most poker players like to limp in with small pairs and hope to hit a flop a set?
I think that that's true. But I think that in Steve's case, because he was such a short stack, I think that the limp would have been much better if he had more chips. I think that he's a short stack. Those blinds and antes really mean a lot to his stack. Again, to Phil's point, it's the first hand of the tournament. Nobody really wants to tangle up with him, and he can pick up all that money that's lying out there, which is just a huge percentage increase in his stack because he is the short stack. I think that if he has a lot more money, then limping in, trying to catch a big hand, maybe setting something up later, becomes just a better play.
Now, when the flop came King Jack 7, the small blind checked a pair of jacks, the big blind checked top pair, the 2 kings, and then he bet $200,000. What do you think of that play?
I like it. As I said, he got Russell off the pair of jacks, and Matt there with a king. He's got to be worried. What did he limp with here? He could have aces. He could have ace king. So he's playing it really cautious.
Do you like his bet on the turn?
I love his bet on the turn. Absolutely.
He's playing.
Okay. Let me ask you all this question. Let me ask you this question. Put yourself in Steve's seat. Okay. Matt didn't raise before the flop. Okay. He checked on the flop. He didn't raise Steve when he bet on the flop. And now he leads out and bets $250,000 into a $640,000 pot, plus the fact that it was the first hand of the tournament, and he asked the guy on the flop, how many chips have you got? When he knows how many chips he's got. Now, does this pass the smell test to you?
Well, it's going to confuse me. I'm not going to be certain what's going on here, and the question is, do I really want to risk the entire tournament, the very first hand here, with a pair of 3s? And if I'm wrong, go, oops, did it again.
Particularly because that wouldn't be, for just the reasons that you said, that wouldn't be such an unusual play for an opponent to make with, say, a set. You really don't know if you're staring down that $250,000 $100,000 bet. Is this a bet that's trying to induce action? Is he just trying to pick up the pot? I don't know. Do I really want to risk my whole tournament on 2 threes when I'm very confused by that bet that just came?
I would like seeing what Matt did with that king 10 in that spot.
I'd like to see you do it.
Information. When he asked how many chips he had, he knew how many chips he had. But he's gaining information. He's counting his chips. He has to reply to him. And he's playing small ball. And right now in poker, small ball is a popular way to play for the top players in the world. They don't want to risk all their chips with king 10 when it comes king jack 7. Therefore, they just call on the flop. Small ball has 2 purposes. 1, it keeps the pot size down. And 2, it can trap the other player.
I totally agree. And it's good stack control. If it turns out that Steve has a huge hand, he can now has another street to get a read. He leads out just the 250. If Steve moves in some way that gives him back a read that his hand is big, he's only lost 250,000.
I never flop a set in that spot, so I wouldn't know what to do there.
Okay.
On the very next hand, Steve put himself between a dog and a lamppost there. You know, we saw him play the ace-4. He got himself broke. I think we're pretty much in agreement here that that was a big blunder on his part. Now, let's talk for a moment about other big blunders that happened in the tournament. Annie, what come to your mind?
Well, there's a blunder when Hassan and Matt get heads up that actually I think is a little bit related to what happened to Steve, except that Hassan doesn't put himself in a position to go broke like Steve did, so it's a little bit less of a blunder. But in Steve's case, he put Martin in a decision where there was twice as much money in the pot as Martin had to call. So to give you an idea of how bad that is, if Martin has ace-queen, which he did, and Steve turns over 2 kings, Martin still has to call. Hassan, I think, made a similar blunder.
But let's watch and see what he does.
He limped in on the button with 7-3 offsuit.
He calls 80,000.
3 more.
But right over the top, Martin, he's got a good hand. Ace-queen, he's raised it up.
I raise.
But Hassan is re-raising here, Vince.
He doesn't buy Martin's strong hand.
A 7-3 offsuit.
How about the moxie of this right now?
Hassan raises, but he only raises another 800,000 into a pot that already has 1.75 million in it, and he's got 7 high. He's inviting Martin to continue in that pot with him. I think that Martin sensed the tentativeness of that raise. I don't think that he got fooled and thought that Hassan had a big hand, because Hassan wasn't limping big hands. He was playing his big hands pretty fast.
Well, in fairness, Hassan didn't call in that spot. He made a play at the pot there. He came
Absolutely.
over the top of it.
It makes it less of a blunder than Steve because he doesn't risk going broke.
All right, Daniel?
Well, I'm going to disagree a little bit. I'm really comfortable with the size of the raise that he made because I think it sells aces. It looks like to me, if he had a garbage hand, he would have raised me more to get me out. But the amount he raised me, like, why does he want me to call so bad? Why is he raising an amount that makes me look like, I want to be in this pot? Basically, thinking that right there, I'm sure Hassan was thinking that, hopefully Martin has nothing. He's just trying to fight back. Martin is just drilling him right now, and he's just looking for some sort of play that might work. He took a stab there. His timing was bad.
Now,
but I'm
I take a
comfortable with the
completely
play.
different read on you saying he wanted to fight back. I think that Hassan was very frustrated, and I think that it shows in that play. He had Martin had been watching Hassan, obviously. Hassan had played kings very fast. He had played his set relatively fast. He had limped in with 10-6 offsuit. He had limped in with some other very small hands, and he hadn't been playing big hands in that way. He'd been playing big hands fast and taking small limps with small hands, and I think that Martin probably noticed that pattern. I don't think that he believed the raise, and I think that Hassan was just pricing him in anyway, so that if Martin has a hand like 10-9 suited, which is obviously dominating on 7-3 offsuit, he's really invited to play that pot
I think
anyway.
Martin knows and Hassan knows that if you play a hand like that, you limp on the button, get raised and re-raised. 9 times out of 10, that's a trap being set right there. And I think Hassan played it just like a trap. He was playing pretend poker, like I got a big hand, I got a big hand. He was unfortunate there.
So you think it was a blunder, you don't? Phil, give us an example of another blunder.
Well, first of all, to the 7-3 hand, I love his play there. I mean, he came right back and raised $800,000 without much hesitation. He's making a play. If Martin throws his hand away, Hassan's going to flip up the 7-3, and it's going to shift all the momentum of the match. He made a good play there.
Yeah.
Martin made a great read there.
He made a great play. He blew $1.4 million. He didn't see the flop with a 7-3 offsuit. Okay, give us an example of another blunder.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, I think one blunder that comes to mind would be the hand with Matt Matros and Martin, where it comes 9-10 Jack Deuce.
The flop is Jack 10 Deuce.
Oh, Martin's hit his pair of jacks and he's checked it. Lots of trap doors in this play.
He's hoping Matt will make a move at this pot.
Yes, he is.
And Matt checks right behind him.
Very wisely. Here's the turn.
Well, now the 9 of clubs comes on the turn. And this makes possible straights out there.
500.
Martin still has top pair. He's going to bet it. Doesn't want to give his opponent a free card to beat him. He bets $500,000. And now Matt with about $2 million in chips, who virtually has no hand and no draw to speak of.
Well, he's got the busted hand. He's obviously disappointed.
Martin comes out and bets $500,000. There's 9-10 jack out there. You've got ace-5. You've got $2.5 million here, okay? There's no good reason that you should put any chips in this pot at this point. It was clearly like just, a donkey play.
Absolutely. That was one of the most donkified plays of the whole tournament. And the other one that matches it is the King 10 hand. What was going on with this King 10 hand where Richard opens the pot?
He's in position on the button, makes it $180,000 to go with King 10.
Yes, he does. Matt quickly going out with Queen 3.
Oh, and look at this. Hassan has finally picked up the hand he's looking for. 2 kings.
Oh.
This is what you dream about, folks.
Oh, it's happy days are here again. Look at that.
I raise.
And he's going to raise him back.
Right back in your face.
Right. He raises it $300,000 more. And he has his man Richard in a terrible position here.
Well, he is in a bind here. Will he make this call?
And he's going to call advance.
Ooh, instincts off a little bit there. He's going to give action to the man.
Well, he's going to try to catch something on the flop to beat these 2 kings.
I don't like Richard's call with King 10 offsuit of the re-raise because Hassan has not been coming over the top of anybody all day. You know he has to have a hand that has King 10 crushed. But now he takes the flop. It comes deuce 3-9.
That's not going to help him.
So it's up to Hassan. He's going to lead out and bet. No free cards here. He bets $350,000.
He quickly bets it.
All in.
Oh, no.
Richard has gone all in with King 10.
Hassan bets out $350, which is a nice little bet with 2 kings there.
That was sweet.
Yeah, that was a sweet little bet he made. And all of a sudden, you're going to push in $2.5 million with King 10 offsuit.
Outs.
No draws at all.
Outs,
that was a
he absolutely
terrible
forced him
blunder.
to pick up an overpair to play there in that spot. Unfortunately for him, Hassan had the overpair, but he must have 10s, jacks, queens, kings, or aces
the way
to
that
play
Hassan
right there.
played that hand, what's he doing? He's hoping to get ace-king laid down.
Did he,
Laid
Mike?
down.
What
I
if
think
he has the
key
ace-king?
theme, really? There's a really key theme, and what you'll notice is that Martin and Hassan didn't do anything stupid. Really what they did was they played within the cards they were getting. The other 2 kids played guessing poker. They took 2 situations where like, I'm all in. Let's just hope he
2
doesn't have
pure
anything good.
guesses where they
And that
shoved
cost them
all
both.
their money in, praying that their opponents couldn't read them. You might like that kind of poker, Mike, but I can tell you, it's not the way to win a tournament. You can't put all your chips at risk all the time like
Boy,
that.
this is from
And
2
to me-
guys that are putting chips in there all the time with
I
nothing.
knew he was going to say that.
I mean, I
No,
can't
Mike,
believe it.
no, because you've got a 26-year-old and a 22-year-old, and they haven't learned the game yet, period.
Okay. The point is, what we see in World Poker Tour Championship events is that people crack under the bright lights. Everyone makes blunders at times at the poker table. As you know, it happened here. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more championship action from the World Poker Tour in just a moment.
Coming up later, the secrets of the pros revealed, how the experts pick up reads on opponents and what it means.
He looked like a deer frozen in headlights, man.
Look and listen. They'll tell you what to look for and how to use it to make you the king of your own home game. And next, get inside the heads of professional high-stakes poker players.
He has to dodge a club.
Feel what it's like to squirm in the hot seat with millions on the line.
I'm sure I got the river to worry about.
Come back here to the corner, where it's all about the poker.
Hello, Mr. Cunningham. Alan, it's a big pot out there, buddy. I'm all in. Don't be scared.
I call.
Only a donkey would make that call.
We play at fulltiltpoker.com.
Tadashi emailed us at the World Poker Tour and asks, if a player were to say call without putting chips in, is he required to honor that bet, or can he suddenly change his mind?
Well, he's required to honor it absolutely 100%. Verbal declarations at the poker table are binding. If you say call, they're going to make you call. If you say raise, they're going to make you raise. If you say fold, they're going to make you fold.
Well, that's right. I mean, even if you said something like, shoot 'em up, Buttercup, That's verbal, and that's binding.
Something you say a lot, I might add.
That's right. So be careful what you say because they're going to hold you to it.
Okay, Steve writes in, and he asks, is there any way to qualify for these World Poker Tour events for free?
Well, not exactly for free. Wouldn't that be nice? But there's a satellite system in place at the online casinos and at the real-world casinos where you can buy in for virtually no money at all.
Well, that's true. Virtually half the players you see every week on the World Poker Tour have gotten into that event via the satellite system. They've played a small fee to win their entry into that tournament. In fact, 2 players at this final table tonight, Richard Grijalva and Matt Matros, both won their $25,000 seats for about $100. They cashed out well over $1 million.
That's a very famous poker statement, Mike. Turning a toothpick into a lumber yard. It's a Southern statement.
Well, let's watch Richard now as he's working on Russell Rosenblum. What do you think of the way these guys played this hand?
Well, honestly, I don't like the way Russell played it right here. He made a raise that committed himself to the pot. So if he would have moved all in or just smooth called, chances are he'd still be in the tournament.
That's what I put you on. That's what I put you on. So.
Phil, what about you?
Well, I'll tell you something. It's easy for him to say afterwards that that's what I put you on, and I believe that he did put him on that after he re-raised all in. If you put him on jacks and he raises on the way in, you could almost just fold the ace-queen there, because why risk all of your chips in a situation where you pretty much know the guy's going to come with you for a coin flip?
So you think he could have got away from this hand?
I think he could have gotten away from the hand, but if he's going to play it, I agree with Daniel, bet it all or just call.
Yeah, I like the just call. I think the medium-sized raise leaves him with only $800,000. He's pot committed at that point because there's $1.8 million in the pot when it comes back to him for the $800,000. Well, now you can't fold even if the guy turns over 2 jacks. You're completely pot committed. So making that kind of middling play instead of just committing himself in the first place, putting some pressure on,
And you see the pain in Russell's face. As you know, to win a poker tournament, you've got to win these races. Unfortunately for Russell, he lost the race here. He's talking to himself as he leaves the arena. Now, all you people played this event. Now, give us your sob stories on how you got broke in this tournament.
I got Rosenbloomed. I mean, those chips that Russ just lost with ace-queen, I had him dead. I trapped him so good. I had ace-queen. It came ace-ace-3. He had an ace-10, and we got all the money in. I was counting it up, ready to make my run. I was already in the money at this point. And, of course, the last card's a 10.
How much money was in that pot, Dan?
There was over $600,000 in the pot. I mean, I was a contender. I was playing.
Wow.
Phil, give us your sob story.
My sob story involves pocket aces, and it involves Kenna James and a sandwich. Kenna raised it on the button. I was in the small blind with 2 aces, eating my sandwich, and I called the $1,600, and I decided, and I announced raise, and I didn't want to stop eating, so I grabbed what I thought was a great move. I grabbed one single $5,000 chip and flicked it out there, trying to use reverse psychology, because people always bet their big chips when they have a big hand. It got back to Kenna, and he studied and studied and studied. Finally, he called. The flop came king 6-6. Now, I bet out a mere $3,000 into about $15,000 here. The reason why is I didn't want him to catch a free 8 if he had pocket 8s. I wanted him to pay. He moved all in. The sandwich fell out of my mouth as I moved all my chips in, and he flipped over king 10 of hearts, and I had 2 aces.
Wow.
The board 6-6 king, $80,000. I have the money counted. I'm over 10-1 favorite. The only way I can lose is if a king comes or heart. The turn was the 8 of hearts. I said, no, not like this. But I was still over a 3-1 favorite. The last card was the 3 of hearts. And I was in such shock, rather than throw a tirade. Annie, you were there.
All right.
I was there, and Phil was a total gentleman, which
As
made
always.
me more shocked than he was.
Well, needless to say, he didn't finish his lunch. Annie, how'd you get broke in this tournament?
Well, actually, how I got broke was totally uninteresting because I had no chips. How I got crippled is a more interesting story. I opened the pot in first position with ace-king offsuit for $9,000. Guy out of the big blind moved in for $80,000, and it was such a huge bet, and the way he was acting, I just kept thinking ace-queen. Ace-queen's such a theme, right? I called, turned out he had king-queen. I was wrong, but in the right direction. Queen, 8. See you later, Annie.
Okay.
I don't even want to
let's talk about how big these World Poker Tour events have gotten. Prize pools are enormous. Now, how about giving the viewers some tips on what it takes to be successful in these championship events? Daniel?
Well, I'll tell you, Mike, I think the key, as we saw with Martin tonight, is playing the marginal situations well. I mean, any monkey can play aces and kings. Those are easy. But what you saw Martin do tonight was he took those tough situations and he made a great world-class decision each and every time. He also, at the same time, played aggressively, yet protected his chip lead.
Good point. Annie?
Yeah, I think that, as many players are in these things anymore, you're playing against 400, 600 player fields. There is nobody who is ever going to win a tournament without getting lucky. And I think the key is to not explode, not bust yourself out with bad play, but to play really well, try to accumulate chips, to put yourself in a position to have lucky things happen to you. Martin put himself in a position that king deuce of clubs hand, he put himself in a position to get lucky with that. He was only risking 25% of his chips there. Certainly had a lucky thing happen to him, but he played great up until that point to put himself in that position, didn't explode like the other players we saw, and break himself on the way.
I agree with you. The key to tournament poker is not necessarily that you have to get lucky, but it's not to be unlucky. Phil?
Did you say that you couldn't explode? Well, I'm in a lot of trouble then.
No kidding.
I think the key is you have to invent a system to play against the players that are at your table. You have to invent a system to play against the players in the tournament. My system was to try to not play big even money hands if I had 9s or 10s or ace-king. And in that way, I'm not putting all of my chips at risk in a single situation. I even took it overboard this year, folding 2 queens when I was pretty sure the other guy had an underpair. I wish I had that situation over again.
Can we use the word donkified again right here?
Now, Phil, you're a great player, so you like to avoid race situations, as all of you do.
Even where I'm a big favorite.
What about the average player? Isn't it his advantage to play race situations for all his money?
I would tell the average player to play big pots with ace-king. It's very rare. Before the flop, that is. It's very rare that you're going to run into aces or kings. So a lot of times you're going to end up in a coin flip situation. This is a great situation for the average player. And so I would say be very aggressive
You know what?
Ace king,
Anytime
ace
Phil's
queen.
in a pot, just stick all your chips in because he's telling you right now he's not even going to call you.
You know what? I want to say, not even just
Good
for
point.
the average player, but for top pros, what you just said holds true. Top pros get drawn to really bad tables. I mean, I've been at tables where I'm sitting down and all of a sudden Phil Ivey's on my left and Huck Seed's on my left and Ted Forrest at my table, and it's just a crappy table. And when you're at a crappy table where you feel like you can't chop small pots and necessarily play marginal situations for a lot of money because your opponents are really good, yeah, you might want to gamble more. And that's true for an amateur as well as a pro.
Or
You'll
when
never
you're
hear these guys say that.
No,
Yeah.
or when you're in a when you're in a situation that Annie's talking about at a really tough table, you might want to say, you know what? What I want to do today is I want to last through the day.
Well, certainly surviving is a key to tournament success. As we know, focus is what the key to success is in tournament poker. That's what we saw Martin do in this tournament. Let's watch Martin play the key pot of this tournament right now against Richard.
I'm all in.
All in, that's all in.
I call.
This is the hand. And you know, one thing I want to point out about Martin during this hand is, you know, he hits this huge card on the river. And a lot of people in that situation would have shown a lot of emotion, been very excited, and you see how focused Martin is, that he has no reaction whatsoever to hitting that card.
He's not done yet. I mean, clearly
exactly.
he's not done yet.
He is so focused that he knows that hand doesn't win him the tournament. You don't see this huge celebration from him because he's got things to do and he's so focused.
Well, certainly we would agree that Martin pitched pretty much of a no-hitter, but I do believe that he got the calls from the umps. By that I mean Steve Brecker gave him $1.4 million in the first or second hand of the tournament. He got lucky he caught a club here. Yet, as you point out earlier, he made tremendous decisions throughout this tournament. All those factors went into him winning this tournament. Now, a guy that's on a roll like that, everything's going, what would you do to stop a guy like that, Daniel?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's no secret formula. There's no real defense against somebody who's playing great poker. You simply have to elevate your game and try to match wit with wit and just try to outmaneuver each other and basically make it a real chess match. Like, again, there's just no secret, all-in strategy that's going to work.
Phil, what do you do to stop
Daniel
him?
is absolutely right. There is no secret formula. Sometimes I might want to play less hands than an opponent, sometimes more. It depends on the feel of the game at that moment in time. If someone just keeps raising me, sometimes I'll go into a shell and won't play very many hands at all and then try to get all my chips back in one fell swoop.
Annie?
Well, I think for me a lot depends on whether he's on my left or on my right. If he's on my right, I'm more likely to do what Daniel said and really try to elevate my game, start trying to play position on him. If he's on my left and he's playing like Martin is, so incredibly focused like that, it's just a very difficult situation to be in. And a lot of times it's the best strategy to not really get involved with that big stack, but let the players who are willing to explode give you their chips so that you can get heads up with that big stack on your left with the chips
funny
from
you
the other
mention that,
players,
because that's exactly
what
what Hassan
Hassan
did. Right.
Exactly, and that's Hassan's strategy. He's got Martin on his left. It's an incredibly difficult situation. He allows the other players to explode into him so that he can get some chips. When he gets heads up with Martin, hopefully Martin just doesn't have that huge chip lead on him because he's played against the people who aren't playing well.
Okay, great points. We're going to deal ourselves out for a moment, but stay tuned. We'll be right back with the rush on the corner in just a moment.
Remember, discretion is the better part of valor sometimes.
Later, the pros give a lesson in chips as power. Learn the right way to play a big stack. And how to defend against it. And next, what are you not seeing in this picture that you should be seeing? What are you not seeing in this picture that you should be seeing? Our experts will ante up with inside information when we come back to the corner. The World Poker Tour, the premier poker show that travels the world to bring you the most exciting events, the most outrageous characters, and the biggest cash prizes on the planet. The World Poker Tour. The original is still the one to watch. What are you not seeing in this picture that you should be seeing? What are you not seeing in this picture that you should be seeing? Our experts will ante up with inside information.
Spotting tells, which are mannerisms that indicate the strength or weakness of an opponent, is a lethal weapon in a poker player's arsenal. The legendary Doyle Brunson, he used to feel that he could beat players without even looking at his cards because he could read them so well. As Doyle says, it's not about the cards, it's about the people. Now, give us some specific tells that you saw on tonight's show. Phil?
Well, Mike, it's very interesting what Doyle said. If you're playing at a table and you actually can see each player's hole cards, you're going to win almost every single tournament that you play in. Therefore, if you read people perfectly, you're going to win almost every single tournament that you play in. Now, we can't actually know when someone's weak that they have a 7-4 instead of like a 10-jack. But what I saw on the show was this. I saw Matt Matros open a pot where he came in with a 7 and a 5, and Hassan checked behind him, and it came Queen, Queen, King. And when Matt bet like a $100,000 bet, he looked like a deer frozen in headlights, man. You know what I mean? He just looked so scared. And Hassan picked up on it. Hassan's like the truck that's driving at the deer and has him frozen in the headlights. Hassan says, yum, yum, I'm going to pick up that $100,000 bet with a bluff on 4th Street. Hassan called $100,000 just to bluff him on the next card.
So, folks, when your opponent freezes in the headlights, call him. Andy?
Or raise him, depending. You know, speaking of Matt, by the way, I think that to be somewhat more specific about what you might have picked up on, I noticed that whenever Matt was weak, he'd very nervously tell the dealer what his bet was.
400.
He's going to pull
And that
the
wasn't
trigger
the case
for
when he wasn't.
300.
He's going to bet 300,000.
So acting the same way on every hand is very important. He did something different on the hands where he was weak and something different on the hands where he was strong.
That was a great one.
That's
I'm
a
going to go
great
back
one,
and look at that show myself again.
Yeah, I
now.
want to just mention one other one from Hassan Habib. There was a hand where he raised with kings. Matt Matros called with ace-3. The board came deuce-5-9 or something like that. Now Hassan went into this kind of kneading his mouth. That's very often a sign of weakness. Obviously, in this case, it was a sign of strength. I think that Hassan was throwing off what's called a reverse towel, where he was trying to look like he was weak to his opponent when he actually had a very strong hand.
Very advanced.
And it worked.
Daniel?
It did.
Well, actually, I noticed something with Hassan also. Sorry to pick on Hassan here, but the hand where he limped with the 7-3 heads up, he's representing a big hand here. He's limping in, and of course, Martin makes the raise, and he comes over the top with a re-raise. What I find interesting about what he did was he came too quickly. It just didn't look natural. He made that raise. He was sort of like feigning strength, and often what we know is when you're feigning strength so aggressively, it usually represents weakness.
I'm not sure Martin didn't do that with the king deuce of clubs also.
Martin did the exact same thing, and I think that's why Richard called him so quickly, because if Martin had a 3 or a bigger hand, I think he would have taken a lot more time to get his money in with the king deuce of clubs. Same mistake that Martin then later took advantage of with Hassan.
Aren't you better off to act at the same speed all the time instead of quickly one time and think a long time on the next card?
Well, one thing's for sure. When you're bluffing $1.1 million, You don't want anybody to know it's a bluff, Hassan.
Okay, those are some good specific tells. Now let's give the viewers some general tells on what they can look for when they're sitting at the poker table.
Well, you know, I think that one of the most important things when you're looking for tells is to not look at your hand before it's your turn to act. I think that one of the big mistakes that an amateur will make is they'll look at their hand and now they're thinking about their hand. They're thinking about what am I going to do with these cards that I have, as opposed to paying attention to what everybody else is going to do with their cards and looking at their face. Because you can pick up a lot of information at that point. It's a great way to get some tells. And some of the things you can look for are, as Daniel mentioned before, a lot of times when you act strong, it means you're weak. When you act weak, it means you're strong. If you watch a player every hand that they act and then you see their cards turned over afterwards, you might see a pattern with that player.
Good point.
Yeah, that's why even if you're planning to fold your hand, it shouldn't matter. You should still be watching everybody in the pot to see what they're doing. And the lesson I think that we've learned from talking about these tells is that you want to act the same on every hand, no matter whether you're bluffing or not. You want to do a similar thing so people can't pick patterns up on you.
Daniel?
Well, I think what you need to look for is basically anything out of character and read whether or not it's an act, because often people will do things out of character as an act. But what you're looking for, basically, I mean, if you saw somebody who's just chatting away and all of a sudden they're in the middle of a hand and they get real quiet, you know, there's a good chance that they might be bluffing. You know, the speed in which people bet, we've already touched on that a few times. If a player normally is very deliberate, all of a sudden acts very quickly, looks suspicious. Also, gibberish is one to look for. I mean, Phil, I know you do this too. You ask somebody a simple question like, how's the weather today? If they answer the question with a bloobity, bloobity, blabbity, bloobity, you know, chances are that they're nervous, and that's a sign of that.
Why anybody would talk to either one of you guys at the poker table is beyond my scope of belief.
Yeah, everybody, if you see them, sit there totally silent, put a muzzle on.
All right, Phil, give us some tells.
Well, I pick up a lot when people talk, and I always try to get people talking, and one thing that I'm known for is asking someone how many chips they have left. Now they're forced to look at their chips, they're forced to count them, they're forced to give an answer. Information, information, information. The way they're looking, the way they make their bet, the logic involved in the bet, all forms a picture in my mind which I just trust. I teach people to trust their instincts. And the reverse side of this is giving a tell-off to someone else. And oftentimes when I'll make a big bluff and I get called and flip up the hand, I memorize exactly what I did. How did you bet the chips? What did you say? Were you crouched over like this? Were you sitting up like this? Were you talking? And I'll give that exact same play when I have a very strong hand. And it's unbelievable how many times...
So what was that?
It's unbelievable how many times they call me or move in. They just give the chips away if you can give a good false tell.
Okay, good point. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more of The Corner in just a moment for our grand finale.
I love tells.
Don't miss the biggest bet in World Poker Tour history.
I'm all in.
Martin goes all in.
We'll show you the action.
Four-way action out of 5 players.
And break down the consequences of a $13.4 million all-in bet.
Go my read.
He's all in.
He's going to push it.
Next.
So there you see it. Martin, the Knife DeKnafe, went from nowhere to the top of the money list this season in one fell swoop. I mean, a lot of money at stake we're talking about here, but what that means is there's a lot of chips in play as well. We certainly saw Martin take advantage of his chip position all day long. Let's take a look at one of the examples where Martin used his advantage in chip position.
Well, you know what, Mike? Chips are power. And here we have a situation where Hassan's going to limp in, Martin's going to raise $300,000, and Hassan decides, finally, I'm going to use my chips as power. I don't need a hand. I'm going with my read. He raises him $800,000. Powerful move. I like the move.
Annie?
Well, you know, I mean, I think, as you know from earlier in the show, I don't particularly like this move. I think that if Hassan really wants to power it out here, he should just go ahead and raise on the button. And I think that it has to do with the context of the tournament. Hassan had been limping in with weak hands, playing big hands strong. And more importantly, Martin hadn't really been getting too jiggy out of the big blind. He hadn't been doing a lot of bluff raising out of the big blind. He was perfectly happy to play flops and check When he didn't have anything, when he had something, he would generally bet. So Martin's just announced a big hand there. I think that Hassan doesn't have to put a third of his chips at risk on a bluff there and give Martin even more power.
Daniel?
Well, I tell you what, it's really interesting. There's so much to this hand. Hassan's limping here. And as she said, Martin wasn't really, joking around in the big blind. He made a raise here. Now, for Hassan to come over the top for a raise that looks like he wants a call, now that's going to send alarm bells in my mind. And if I have a hand like, well, he had an ace-queen, which is legitimate, ace-8, what am I going to do with that hand? I'm probably going to say, you know what, Hassan? I'm going to give you some credit here. So I like the size of the raise Hassan made because it also offered him one opportunity to get away from it, as he did.
And remember this. I love the fact he's trying to make a move here, and if he gets Martin to throw the hand away, he's going to flip 7-3 offsuit, face up.
Psychological warfare.
Psychological warfare changes the whole flow of this thing.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say about Martin is he used his chips as power even more than Hassan.
I'm all in.
Boom, comes right back over the top. $5 million bet. Boom.
He had the chips to do it. Chips are power in tournament poker, as we know. Now, in addition to playing his chip stack so well, what else do you think that Martin did to give him this championship today?
Well, I think, again, you have to look at all the marginal situations. I looked back and I saw about 8 different situations. He's got 2 8s, he gets away from 2 kings. He has king-queen, he doesn't play against ace-queen. He has an ace-5 of hearts against Sun, he plays cautiously. Nothing he did looked really spectacular. It didn't look fancy. Basically, his motto, his mantra, if you will, was just don't do anything stupid and let the cards sort of decide the fate of his tournament.
Good mantra.
Yeah, I think that one thing that Martin can really show us that he did beautifully was he exercised a lot of emotional control. In a big money, big pressure situation, I think that you can see Hassan getting extremely frustrated. I think that you see Matt looking very nervous, really cracking under the pressure. I think that you see Richard crack some under the pressure. Definitely Russell does it as well. We know Steve cracked under the pressure, and here's this guy who literally never cracked.
He never lost a pot.
He never even cracked. Well, no, he never even cracked when things went well for him. That's a very good point, Mike. Sometimes you can see emotional control in situations where things go your way. He hits the 10 of clubs on the river when that king deuce of clubs hits, and he doesn't even crack. A smile.
That's amazing.
A lot of people hit that 10 of clubs, you'd see it.
$5 million, you got to see some emotion, right?
Or you'd see it, oh my God, I'm so sorry, you had the best hand, some kind of condolence to your opponent. He
I'm
sits
not saying
there.
You're not going to say that here for $2.7 million.
Some people do,
All right, Phil.
Let me tell you something. In the history of poker, until the last 2 years, we have never seen cameras underneath the table. I have watched people self-destruct in world championships since 1988. We never knew exactly how they self-destructed.
Right.
They never had to show their hands. This is a recent rule in poker. When you go all in, you have to flip your hand face up. We had millions of people self-destructing in these tournaments for many years. It just takes, there's so much pressure, there's so much money, and some people just aren't ready to win, and they're going to find a way to lose, and we see that in this show right here. I love the cameras. I love the pressure.
You love the cameras.
Yes.
That's
No
putting it mildly.
kidding.
Well,
Phil
certainly
Howard
Martin
likes people
played
to watch
great
him.
today, but as it takes to win any poker tournament, things have to fall your way like they did for him today. Players giving him chips when they shouldn't have. He got lucky on the river to catch a card. He made marginal decisions. It was his day, as we say in the trade. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
I'm with Daniel. I mean, throwing away the 2 8s against 2 kings, I've hit on that a couple times. Great play.
Didn't
Great
even bat
read.
an eyelash.
Just
Right.
2 seconds.
Limping with the ace-5 when it was a situation he could have raised. There were a lot of plays like that. Didn't get his chips in play. Total emotional control. Steady.
My
focus.
hat's off to the man. Nice job, Martin.
Okay, I want to thank all of you for being here with me on the premiere edition of the WPT Poker Corner. And for those of you at home, we hope you appreciate the insight that these pros have given you today, and you'll tune in next time for more of the World Poker Tour Poker Corner. Until then, the corner is closed.
Boy, that was